so fast. It's such a powerfully quick process.
The results were just short of phenomenal.
I kept getting feedback from my clients saying that it worked on them over and over again.
What's interesting about EFT is that it is a process which really, in some sense, engages like super learning.
EFT releases people from the chains that keep them bound to a mediocre life.
This may be the most important new therapy to arrive in both medicine and psychology for a century.
EFT should be tried for everything. It's an amazing resource tool, and it should be in everyone's first aid kit.
So I think we've got to take a look at who we are and what we've got and how we function, and then begin to apply this information in a practical manner to improve the quality of our life.
Hi, this is Jessica Ortner, the host of the 2009, 10, 11, and soon to be 2012 Tapping World Summit. In the exciting lead up to the summit, I've had the pleasure to interview some extraordinary people. So if you are just joining us, make sure you watch those videos above. So today, I'm going to get to speak with a woman who's been a huge inspiration in my life, and I know an inspiration in the lives of literally millions of people. Cheryl Richardson is a New York Times best-selling author. You may already know her. She's not only been featured in the New York Times, but also the Today Show, and a frequent expert on the Oprah Winfrey Show. So today we are sitting with her over Skype, and she's going to teach us how we can use tapping to improve our lives, how to use it to deal with stress and overwhelm, and some really exciting and easy action steps you can take today to see a real difference. So let's go speak to Cheryl now. Welcome, Cheryl. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Jessica. Nice to be with you.
I want to start off just by asking you to hear more about your insights. Most people's daily practice consists of feeling very stressed and feeling very overwhelmed. It's so common. Why do you think stress and overwhelm is impacting us now more than ever, and why is it important to really look at?
Well, you know, it's funny, Jess. My very first book, which was called Take Time for Your Life, there was a chapter in there called What's Fueling You? And I put this whole piece about adrenaline addiction. From my perspective, as somebody who's been teaching self-care for many years, and somebody who has read historical work on society and self-care, let's just say, generally speaking, if we went back 100 years ago, we would hear people talking about a level of stress and overwhelm that actually sounds very similar to today. So while I think there are very real reasons that I'll talk about in a minute as to why people feel overwhelmed, the reality is that it's more about the human condition, how we think and how our energy systems work, than the circumstances in our lives. The reason I point that out is because that's where our power lies. Our power lies within us, and with the recognition that we are the being in the energy system who's piloting this plane, or, you know, who's the captain of this ship living this life, you know, moving through life. So when you remind people of that, they remember, oh, if I'm the one that's contributing to my stress and overwhelm, I'm the one that can change it. Now, certainly technology is added to our feelings of stress and overwhelm. We didn't have answering machines, let alone email and texting and things like that. So there are more and more ways for people to get to us, to make requests of us, to move into the field of our lives, you know. When people talk about feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I actually remove those words. Stress is a great catch-all phrase for very specific things that are going on in someone's life. One person might be stressed because they have a health issue that's consuming their thinking all the time. Someone else might be stressed because they're trying to hold down a full-time job while raising children and taking care of everybody else in their lives. Someone else might be stressed because they're not able to pay their bills and they're working at a very busy job that just isn't giving them the kind of income they know they deserve. So we have to first look at what's creating the stress and overwhelm in your life. And I will tell you from my experience that 95% of the people I speak with have probably 30 to 50% more on their plates than any healthy human being should have on their plates, quite frankly. So this is where what happens is the body's fight or flight system gets tweaked on a regular basis, and we're now living in a chronic state of fight or flight. And adrenaline actually becomes an energy source. So as human beings, we all need energy in order to function. We are an energy system. We'll get that energy any way we can. For a lot of people, that energy comes from rushing, being chronically late, caffeine. It comes from things like drama and gossip at work, engaging in complaining. It comes from the busy mind. You see, it's important to recognize that if you've been running on adrenaline for a long time, chances are your adrenal system's becoming depleted, your cortisol levels are elevated or decreased depending on your system. So for example, if your cortisol levels are elevated, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night with thoughts racing through your head, and you're going to have a very difficult time going back to sleep. Part of that is a physiological issue. It's not just an emotional issue of, oh, if I could stop thinking these thoughts, I'd feel better. The reason the mind is racing is because the body's racing, and we need to calm the body down and treat the body and the adrenal system in order for the mind to follow a lot of times. That's where tapping becomes a powerful resource. As Nick talks about in his book, tapping regulates the amygdala. It starts to calm the amygdala down, the excitable part of the brain, and we can begin to feel a system shift both energetically and physically in the body where we start to relax. Here's a great example of that. The other night I woke up in the middle of the night and I had one of those, I had just fallen asleep and I had one of those little mini terror dreams that we sometimes have. Who knows what it was for, but in my dream, I just remember somebody was standing in front of me with a gun and they were about to shoot me and there was nowhere I could go. And I had that real moment of, oh, I'm going to be shot. And I woke up and adrenaline was coursing through my veins. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. And I thought to myself, the first thing I thought was, okay, there's no way in hell I'm going back to sleep now because I'm just way too pumped up. But then I remembered the tapping. I didn't do any setup phrases or anything. I just started to go through all of the different points and I started to tap while I was laying there, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my body. And I continued tapping all the way through to the points. And within 2 minutes, my body had calmed right down and I was asleep within 5 minutes. So that's an example of how when the body is overstimulated, the mind becomes overstimulated. Very often we try to treat it in the opposite way. Oh, if I could just stop thinking and meditate, then my body would calm down. That's true for some people, but my experience is most people need to calm the body down and the energy system down, and then the mind and the life follows.
That makes a lot of sense. And if someone wants to begin using tapping for a daily practice, do you have any suggestions on how we fit that into our lives? Do we set a certain time to do it, a certain place? What are your suggestions?
So there's a few things. First of all, I always recommend that people go to thetappingsolution.com and just learn about tapping, learn the algorithm, learn the points. And I also recommend that people see the movie because I just think it's inspiring. It shows people what tapping can do and then it makes them want to tap. I, for the longest time, had a big sign in my bathroom that said tap. Now, I think go time for people to tap because why? We do it very frequently. It's a private situation. Throughout the day, many people will use the bathroom 2, 3, 4, 5 times, whatever. So I would put some kind of a sign in the bathroom, or I might put a sign in the bedroom so that when you go to bed, before you go to sleep, you use the tapping to help calm the body down, or to calm the body down when you wake up. Because some people who are running on adrenaline wake up and they shoot out of bed. They pop out of bed like toast out of a toaster. It's a perfect time to tap. Tapping takes 2 minutes. It takes such a short amount of time. What we need to do is remember, the other thing I would recommend, I have this little app on my iPhone called Tell Me Later. It's all one word, Tell Me Later. And I found it on, my husband found it, I think it was, and turned me onto it. You can set the Tell Me Later app to remind you of anything throughout the day on a daily basis. So you can set some kind of a reminder app, some kind of an alarm that just simply says tap. And you might start out with twice a day, where you remind yourself to tap twice a day, and you pick the time that might be most, beneficial to do that. Or you might remind yourself to tap 10 times a day and use 4 of them and not 10 of them. But we need some kind of a reminder. And I can guarantee you that if you just give yourself a week of remembering to tap every day, what will happen is it'll be something you naturally turn to. Tool in your toolbox so that you get upset about something, you're at work, your boss goes into her office with a coworker, they shut the door, you go into a regress state, you think, oh, I know they're talking about me. Oh my God, what did I do? She likes her better than me, like whatever. You go into that regressed little kid state, you go to the bathroom, you do some tapping, or you sit at your desk and you do some tapping. You're on an airplane, the plane hits turbulence, you start to feel anxious, immediately you start tapping. It might be that you go to pay your bills, and when you sit down to write the checks, all this anxiety comes up about, oh, I don't have much money left. How am I going to pay? You just start tapping. And then I also love to add to the tapping positive affirmations as a way to finish it up. So if you're feeling anxious in that job setting, you can literally do some tapping. And even if you want, you can be tapping saying to yourself, I am powerful. I own my magnificence. I own my magnificence. Or I am powerful beyond measure. Or I'm right here with you, kid. Everything is well. All is well. Like just some kind of, if you're paying your bills and you're anxious about money, just tapping, abundance is my birthright and it flows into my life. Every time I turn around, I get a check in the mail. I openly receive abundance from the universe. Or Hayes' favorite affirmations that I love and use all the time, especially if you're feeling anxious, is only good lies before me. So as you're tapping, only good lies before me, only good lies before me, only good lies before me. And not only will you calm down, you'll actually shift your state very, very quickly.
Well, that brings up another question I think many people might have is why do we have to say the negative and how we're feeling in the moment instead of just trying to jump to the positive affirmations?
Well, it's interesting. There are times where I'll jump to a positive affirmation, but I will tell you that for me, the reason that we say the negative is first to recognize that it's there. It's there. Very few people are feeling bad and loving it. They're not walking around going, oh, I feel horrible today and this is fantastic. Instead, it's, oh, I feel horrible today. What did I do to make this happen? So there's a sense of self-blame that goes on. So stating the negative allows you to name it. Secondly, by stating the negative, I think what it does is it triggers the brain and the energy system to begin to make links between what's happening in present day and what's happened before so that you can go back and begin to treat the root causes of whatever energy pattern is stuck in place. And saying the negative will also help you to draw. So number 3, saying the negative will help you to draw into your energy system the block that is very concrete, powerful way so that you can eliminate it. Because as you know, the more we can put ourselves in that state of discomfort, whatever it is, of anxiety, of fear, of overwhelm, the more we can bring that state up into the energy field, the better the chances are of eliminating it, the better the chances are of linking to what's truly causing it. And then you can go from there to the more positive statements.
Absolutely. So I want to move on to a topic that you're known for, which is teaching people how to create boundaries and how to say no. So before we talk about the tapping aspect, why is this something that we should really begin to look at when it comes to our own life, when it comes to boundaries and saying no?
Well, it's funny, so one of my most recent books is called The Art of Extreme Self-Care, and it's all about, that book covers 12 extreme self-care practices that we can use once a month to begin to really live a more soul-directed life, live a life that really is reflective of the essence of who we are instead of being so outer, so focused. It just helps people to stop living from the outside in and instead live from the inside out and live with more integrity and more authenticity. The most popular chapter of that book is a chapter called Let Me Disappoint You. The second most popular is a chapter called You're So Sensitive, which is really interesting to me because in the chapter called Let Me Disappoint You, I talk about the reality that in order to live a soul-directed life, you must get comfortable with saying no, hurting people's feelings, having them be angry at you, and disappointing people. That's just a fact. If you want to spend your life avoiding people being upset with you, avoiding disappointing people, avoiding hurting people's feelings, you will actually be avoiding your life. So we want, the goal here is for you to live your life. It's difficult because many of us have been so raised by a generation of parents whose number one rule was worry about what other people think before you worry about what you think. Now, I don't know about you, Jess. I represent an older generation, and I know when I was working on the book, I remember talking, and they said, the thing we heard all the time was, what will people think? What will neighbors think? What will our friends think? What will family members think? And so we learned to live defensively, and we learned to invest a tremendous amount of energy in managing the perception of others, so that all of a sudden, I care more about keeping you happy than keeping me happy. What happens is, when I start to invite people to say no and to disappoint others or to hurt someone's feelings, not intentionally, but because it's inevitable, what happens is all this anxiety comes up for people. And in an effort to avoid that short-term anxiety, they say yes instead. Or in an effort to avoid the anxiety that comes from feeling guilty, they say yes instead. And before you know it, what ends up happening is the person who's always saying yes when they really want to say no builds a state of chronic resentment in the body, in the energy field, in their lives. And that resentment, I believe, is the source of many of the illnesses that we see. It's literally, if you could see resentment in the body as this kind of like black tar that gets built up in the body, and after a while, it's like you've got to start releasing it. This is where tapping is so incredibly powerful. Because if you want to start taking risks and saying no, when you really recognize that you have to take care of yourself, when that anxiety comes up, that's the time to tap. Even though I said no to my friend Mary about helping her move, and I feel horrible about it, I deeply and profoundly accept myself. Even though I said no to my husband that I can't make dinner tonight because I'm exhausted and I feel so guilty, I love and accept myself anyway. Even though I have to bow out of working this weekend and I know my boss really wants me to, but my kid needs me at her soccer game, I love and accept myself anyway. And as we do that, we do two things. We start to calm the amygdala down, we start to calm the anxiety state in the body, and we start to grow ourselves back up. Because very often what happens, that anxious state is simply reflective of a regress state. We've gone back into a younger place where we don't feel very powerful in our lives. Suddenly I'm a 5-year-old when I've said no to a friend who needed my help because I really need to be home with my family. And I start to have this anxiety come up, and then I start to imagine my friend not liking me, or I start to imagine my friend talking about me with other friends, or gossiping about whatever. All of a sudden, I'm stepping back into a regress state, and I'm no longer 52. I'm now 12 or 13. Well, if you tap, you bring yourself back. You can bring yourself back to whatever happened at 12 or 13 that began that message of it's not okay for you to do what you want to do because you've got to manage everybody else. You don't want them talking about you. You don't want them to there. You get to tap on that situation. And when you do, it actually viscerally becomes easier and easier for you to say no. So it's a beautiful marriage between the two. We need support. We need the language to say no with grace and love, and we need a way to manage the body's energy system to reduce anxiety, and that's what tapping does.
What if someone's listening to this and they're going, Cheryl, I get what you're saying, but I'm a little bit hesitant because I like being the one that people go to for help. I like being dependable and honest, and I feel like it makes me a good person. What's your advice for someone who is taking that stance?
So then we get to the bigger conversation about coaching in general. You know, one of the things that goes along with a society that is running on adrenaline, let's say, is we really do look for quick fixes. Why? Because we usually wait a long time to actually make the corrections we need to make in our life. We get to that chronic state of resentment. We get to that place of chronic overwhelm, and we just want to get the hell out of it as quickly as possible. And so we look for the quick fixes. But the reality is, If you're somebody who has always been there for others, if you're somebody who has built an identity as someone people come to, and you know what, I'm speaking from experience here, and look, I now do it for a living, right? If you're somebody that people always turn to, there are certain needs you're going to get met by that experience. You're going to feel important. You're going to get maybe a need to be recognized, a need to feel valued, a need to be needed will be met by to begin to dismantle the identity that's been set up based on taking care of everybody else and begin to reestablish a new identity with you taking care of you. I mean, I can say to you very confidently today that my identity is based on my relationship with myself from the inside out. My self-care is my number one priority. I'm okay with pissing you off. I can't even apologize. I can't even say I'm sorry that that's happening. I'm really not. I'm a good woman with a good heart. I love humanity. I'm here to do important healing work, and I cannot do that if my identity is wrapped up in how you perceive me, what you need from me. If my identity is wrapped up in being the queen of everybody, the queen that everybody turns to with their problems. A lot of people do turn to me with their problems, and 80% of them I just turn away. Why? Because you know what? My life needs to come first, just like your life needs to come first. And so when someone says to me, well, I want to start setting boundaries, but I like the fact that people turn to me, I say to them, what's great about that is that you recognize it, tap on it. Even though I'm somebody that everybody turns to, and it makes me feel important and needed and necessary in the world, I love and accept myself anyway. Even though I'm somebody that everybody turns to when they have a problem, and I end up feeling like I'm really valued by everybody, but ultimately it hurts me. I love and accept myself anyway. It's paid a huge price for being at the center of everybody's lives and being there for them when they need them. And it's really starting to hurt me in ways that I'm worried about. I love and accept myself anyway, and I believe in change. So that's just an example of the progression down into what's really going on.
Right. So you shared with us before how we can tap after the fact if we're feeling guilty for doing it. But what about tapping before? Because many times someone needs to have an interaction with someone and they're going to have to say no. And even the thought of having to stand up and say it makes them kind of shiver, like they're scared the words aren't going to come out. How can you use tapping in that situation?
It's a really great question, Jess. First of all, I want to say, as somebody who's been teaching boundary setting for many, many years, I am still someone who feels anxious when I need to have an honest conversation with somebody about something that's bothering me. I'm naturally conflict phobic. I think on some level, most of us are. Very few people say, yes, I can't wait for this conflict. I'm going to charge in and kick your butt. Like, most people don't do that. Most people do feel sort of anxious and uncomfortable about it. And this is where tapping can be incredibly valuable. So for example, let's say that let's say you're going to go in and ask your boss for a raise. And you've done your homework ahead of time. So for example, if I'm working someone who's in a situation like this, we're already going to have looked at things like, are you worthy of a raise? What have you done? What have you accomplished at your job that makes you worthy? Let's spell it out. Let's talk about how you can represent yourself in a conversation based on the success that you've had. Let's do the research to see if, in fact, the kind of raise that you're hoping for makes sense for the position you're in or the industry you're in. We're going to do some of the homework. And then we're going to, as a coach, let's say working with a client, I'm your support person. So we're going to then craft the language that will allow you to ask for a raise in a professional, in a respectful, and an adult way. And once we craft that language, I'm going to be available to you both before the conversation and after, so that any nerves you feel beforehand, we can work with. And afterwards, regardless of what happens, I'm going to help you feel like a king or queen. In that formula, tapping is incredibly valuable. So let's say from the very beginning, when you even think about asking for a raise, you start to feel anxious. We go in and we use tapping beforehand. Why? To help calm the amygdala down, calm the anxiety down, and then to identify where have you asked for something that was rightfully yours in the past and was turned down? Or where have you asked for something in the past and was given a hard time about it, shamed about it, belittled for it? Let's go back and tap on that and help deal with that so that we can kind of preempt what might come up beforehand. Then as we go through the process, so suddenly we make the argument for why it's time for you to get a raise, and then we start crafting the language. Once again, the anxiety comes up. we do two things: tap on the anxiety to calm the body down. Also look at, okay, is there anything else coming up from the past related to now? And then literally, and I use tapping beforehand all the time, literally before you walk into that boss's office, you go into the bathroom, you do the tapping that you need to do. I think it's very important during that time to finish the round of tapping with some kind of very powerful, strong affirmation. I trust myself to handle whatever happens, I trust myself to be professional and strong and clear. I trust myself to be fair and well-informed, whatever it might be. And then you go in knowing that you've got the tapping to lean on along with your support person after that conversation. And you can use that for any kind of boundary setting situation where you feel anxious at all. And it really is very, very powerful. I've seen people go from, there is no way in hell I will ever ask for a raise, to, oh my God, is it time yet? I cannot wait to go in there because I'm well informed, I'm excited, I get why I deserve this raise. And you know what? If it's not the right time, if my boss doesn't give it to me, I may just need to look for another job somewhere. Very adult, clear, energetic position.
Absolutely. And what I love about you is you're giving people permission to stand up for their own lives and to be your own best friend, which I think is something that isn't spoken about because we're so used to caring about everybody else that we neglect ourselves.
Yes, very, very often when I'm by the media, I've had situations where people have said to me, aren't you just teaching people to be selfish? And I say, yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing. And I think of it as selfish with a capital S. It's really about honoring the soul. I mean, look, the reality is, if you're out to dinner with me because you feel a sense of guilt and obligation, I'd rather you not have dinner with me. If you're helping me move this weekend, but you're really pissed because you're exhausted and you wanted to be home hanging out with your dog, I'm going to feel that resentment in some way. Remember, we're energetic beings. I'm going to feel that resentment going on, and some part of me is going to be uncomfortable by that, is going to be hurt by that, and that resentment is going to drive a wedge between the two of us. So the things that are unsaid, the things that are unspoken, the things that are not addressed between close relationships, whether they're friendships, marriages, collegial relationships, employer-employee, the more that goes unsaid, and the more times we say yes when we really want to say no, the more damage we do to our relationships. And I would venture to say that if you're someone who does that in your relationships, then they're actually not relationships, they're arrangements. You have a series of arrangements in your life that cannot nourish you in the way a true, authentic, loving relationship can. Now, are you going to lose some people in your life? Yeah. Are your relationships going to change? Without a doubt. I have a handful of people in my life who I know I could call at the very end and beg out of a commitment I made because something's up and I need to take care of myself. And these people would be able to say to me, I don't like it, I'm really disappointed, but I love you and I support you 100% in taking care of yourself. And that's what I want for everybody. Those kind of deeply intimate, connected relationships built on authentic communication, not built on complete bullshit, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Cheryl, I want to move on to a different topic. Since I've read your books, I can happily say without any shame or embarrassment that I am a highly sensitive person. And I think that is one reason that I was so attracted to tapping, because I found it to be such an amazing tool. And through all my work, I realized that a lot of people who are sensitive are attracted to tapping. Yet when we look at how society looks at sensitivity, people think it's something that you have to hide. It means that you're weak. What's your take on sensitivity?
First of all, for the most part, celebrate my sensitivity. I love that about me. It makes me a loving woman, makes me appreciate beauty. It makes me want to contribute to the planet. It makes me care about nature, humanity. It makes me completely unable to walk by a homeless person on the street and not feel a piece of my heart break. It makes me care deeply. And there are moments in life, without a doubt, where my sensitivity also brings me to my knees and makes me wonder how I survive on the planet. That's just the truth. My very first coach, after complaining to him about my sensitivity and how much I hated it, said to me, "That's funny, Cheryl. I look at the work you do in the world and I think your sensitivity is your greatest gift. And if I were you, I'd protect it. And that changed my life in that instant, that reframing of my sensitivity as, instead of an anchor, a weight that I was carrying around that I hated, a gift, a precious jewel that I was carrying around that would serve me in my life. It completely shifted the way I looked at it. I think it's interesting that the chapter called You're So Sensitive in the Art of Extreme Self-Care is another popular chapter, because I think just at our core, we're all sensitive people. And what happens is we have to continuously put on armor in order to survive on a planet that is harsh and cruel sometimes. I mean, the speed of life causes me to have to, hole up to protect myself. And I think what happens over time is that we naturally begin to cover ourselves up so strongly because we don't have the tools or the permission or the skills to be able to protect our sensitivity. I actually see it as one of my most important callings, is to name it, to support it, and to give you the skills and the tools you need to be able to protect it. Now, let me give you some specific examples of that. If I'm sitting in a restaurant and I'm with friends, and which I love being with my close friends. If I'm sitting in a restaurant and the music is too loud so that I have to yell for you to hear me and you have to yell for me to hear you, I am absolutely going to go to someone and ask them if they could please turn the music down. Now, I remember the first time I did that while out to dinner with some friends, and someone said, I can't believe you just asked them to turn the music down. And my reaction was, I can't believe you're going to sit here for 2 hours and listen to it. I'm too sensitive. And I'm not here at a restaurant to listen to music. I'm here to listen to you. So I simply went and asked, and 9 times out of 10, they'll turn the music down. If I'm in a room and the light is too harsh, I'm going to turn the light down. I make sure that when I go to bed, I have these great sheets that are like furry soft. And when I get into bed, I love it. It's so comfortable and comforting. And it's a reflection of protecting my sensitivity. I'm also going to do things like make sure that if, for example, I have to have a conversation with someone who is volatile or toxic, I probably will not see them face to face. I may not even speak to them on the phone. I might send an email. Now, in the past, I would have never done that. My, quote, integrity would have said, oh, you must see them face to face. You must have an honest and direct conversation. But the reality is, in order to protect my sensitivity, there's absolutely no way in hell I'm going to get in front of a toxic person and put myself at risk. Why is this important? The more we learn to set boundaries and the more we learn to protect our sensitivity, the more we use tapping to actually support us in protecting our sensitivity, the more that sensitivity can come to the surface and present itself in our lives. If you don't teach yourself that you are a trustworthy steward for your sensitivity, you won't be able to express it. And I would venture to say that if you cannot express the fullness of your sensitivity, you can't express the fullness of your gifts. I just think it's really hard to do that. So what do? You make sure your physical environment supports your sensitivity. You make sure the people in your life support your sensitivity. You ask, get in the habit of asking yourself, I'm going to give this speech. What would support my sensitivity so that when I'm on stage, you get to feel my heart. You get to hear my soul speak. You get to be touched by me, and I get to be touched by you energetically because I've taken care of myself. I've made sure that I've tapped before going on stage. I've made sure that I've had plenty of water. I make sure that the person who's introducing me is somebody that is going to say something that makes me feel good. Or, many times, just a laundry list of all of my accomplishments before a speech, I actually tell them not to. I say, please, 2 or 3 lines is all I want you to repeat, and then let me get on stage and do my thing. Why? Because I know that hearing all about the TV and the newspapers and all that stuff just makes me uncomfortable and just uncomfortable, and it's not protecting my sensitivity. I want to be open-hearted when I get on stage. I want to be open-hearted when I get on the phone. I want to be open-hearted here while I'm talking with you. So we always have to be asking ourselves, what do I need in order to feel well protected so that my open heart can present itself here?
I love that.
And if someone feels like their sensitivity really shows up with constantly feeling emotions to the sense where they're feeling compassion for someone, but they're taking on their feelings. A lot of times a friend is going through a trauma and we go through that as if we're going through it ourselves. What advice do you have for someone that struggles with that?
That's also a really great question. I'm so glad you asked it, because a lot of people become overly empathic, and all of a sudden you literally are taking on people's energy. So a wise therapist of mine many years ago said to me, Cheryl, stay on your side of the line. Just a simple little thing she said, but I remember it, so that if I'm talking with someone, and I have a chance to practice this all the time. I'm always engaged in conversations in my work with people who are going through difficult times, in a book signing line, on my radio show, during a workshop or whatever. And inside I say to myself, Cheryl, stay on your side of the line, which means I can love you, I can be present for you, but I cannot give you what you need if I merge into you. So I stay on this side of the line. Now, there are some people, Jess, who really are, there are some people who will take your energy, or really, I think, sort of infiltrate your energy. I get the hell away from them as quickly as I can. I just do. It's not my responsibility to stay and allow you to affect my energy system in any way. As a matter of fact, it's my responsibility to protect my sensitivity. So I think it's important to begin to just become aware. Who are the people in my life who seem to take my energy, or who affect my energy in a negative way, and start to put some space? Sometimes that space, this is important, sometimes that space is not saying to the person, so how are you doing today? Or when someone says to you, I was up all night, I was really upset about, what happened at work. Making a conscious decision to not say, what happened at work? But to simply say, gee, I'm really sorry to hear that. And to move on the conversation. Like, begin to look for the places where you invite people to kind of spill over into your energy field, and stop using that language. Start to put some of those boundaries between you and that person. Be willing to not engage with somebody who consistently leaves you feeling drained after. And when your heart is open, I remember walking down the streets of Manhattan one day. This is also important, Jess. Walking down the streets in Manhattan, and there was a man laying right on the sidewalk sleeping. And I was in a very vulnerable place. I was by myself. I could feel it right now. And I looked at this person's eyes and I thought, oh my God, Cheryl, just pull it together, pull it together. And in that instant I went, no, actually it's okay. There's no one around me. There's strangers around me. Allow yourself to feel this. Let it move through you. Don't take it on and let it get stuck, but let it move through you. This is a sad sight. This sight warrants tears. This sight warrants maybe you stepping in and saying, is there something I can do for you? Is there a resource I can get for you? It may warrant putting a $10 bill in a can, or whatever it might be. Sometimes the answer is to allow our hearts to open and to let the emotions flow through. But you've really got to pick and choose when that happens, and you really have to limit how that happens in order to protect yourself. And it's easier to do that the better you get at protecting yourself and not taking on other people's stuff. So just remember, Cheryl, Jess, stay on your own side of the line.
Absolutely. And what I love about your work is, at first, I have to admit, it's uncomfortable. You make people create those boundaries and stand up for their own lives. But once you begin to do it, it becomes easier and easier, and then everything becomes enriched.
And this is why tapping is critical. The only thing that stands between you and living authentically is your discomfort with discomfort. The only thing that stands between you telling the truth and not telling the truth is the anxiety you feel when you feel guilty, or you feel afraid that someone's not going to like you. It's the discomfort. We have to get comfortable with discomfort in order to truly live our lives. And I can't think of a faster, more elegant, and efficient way to deal with that issue than to tap. Because every time you tap and you begin to lower your anxiety level, you begin to calm the amygdala down, it gets easier and easier. And you know what's going to happen? I'm here to tell you, I'd stake my life on this. You will find yourself in situations where you'll think, oh my God, I just said no and I didn't feel uncomfortable. Wow, I just set a boundary there and I walked away and didn't think about it again. It's like anything. With enough practice, you will become masterful at honoring your soul.
Yes, I love that. And Cheryl, to wrap up, people, again, we've been talking about how we tend to be very busy. Why is it so important for people to take the time to participate in the Tapping World Summit and learn this? Just to summarize what you've been saying.
We are busy because we choose to be busy. Let's not forget that. We can choose to be happy. We can choose to feel good. When you feel good, you bring better situations into your life. The tapping is, I used to say it's the therapy of the future, but it's here. The tapping process, learning it, sharing it with others, using it in your work, if in fact that's appropriate for you. I think tapping as a family tool that is used by all family members is critical. Please, God, teach your children early how to use the tapping. I use tapping with kids for years. They don't ask any questions about it. They don't think it's weird. They think it's fun. It's like a game. And so teaching our children tapping around the breakfast table, tapping around the dinner table, it's one of the most powerful tools you can give your kids. And by osmosis, you're going to pick it up as well. So, we all want to feel good. We all want to live great lives. And we are fortunate to be on the planet at a time where this very simple and elegant form of intervention is available to us. We need to use it, and we need to use it every day.